Hi there, this is Phil with Phil Effects. I got another Harmony tutorial. What I wanted to cover here today is just give a brief overview of the differences of how in layer properties with an object that you're trying to animate, you can animate that with the layer property of the position either being controlled by what's called a 3D path. So I have the layer properties over here, or the layer properties of the position of the path of the object can be separate. And the difference between these two is actually quite a bit, both in terms of the controls that you have and especially in how you implement doing easing and easing in and easing out and how you control that path. So I'm not making a judgment call in terms of one is better than the other. That's not the purpose of this demo. What I'm trying to do is just show the difference of how you would animate and how you implement easing using either a 3D path or a separate control. They both have their advantages, they both have their disadvantages, and depending upon the situation and what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your animation, one may be the better alternative than the other. Having two is actually quite nice because there are some unique features with each one. So let's go ahead and get started. So I've got two layers here, one with a layer that I've labeled 3D ball and one that I've called separate. So the separate ball is my blue ball here and the 3D ball is my green ball. All right, so let's start with the 3D ball. So I have this set up like you should have in all of your animations. I've centered the pivot point, so the pivot point is in the center of the geometry. I'm ready to animate, and with all animations you want to start with the first keyframe, so I go in here and let me hit my first keyframe. Just a little bit on the setup. I don't have stop motion keyframes as the default, so this is going to do interpolation, and we will see animation keyframes in between, motion animation keyframes in between my or motion frames in between each of my keyframes. Okay, so let's go out here, and just to make things simple, I'm going to just go about every 10 frames to put in a keyframe. So I set my time and I come down here and let's just move the ball here. You will notice that I have enabled the show controls, which can be done with this orange toggle right here, toggle icon. So I can click this and click this off. You can also go up here and view and show control, which is Command F11. Okay, so we set that at 10. Let's go to 20. My ball's going to come up here and go like that, and go down here to 30, and I'm going to have the ball come down. And that's it. So this is a very simple animation. We can loop and play this through, and it's very boring because every frame is the same and there's no easing or that's been added to anything. All right, so let's see how this works out. I want to go in and add some easing to this, so let's do that. And the best way to do that is using the easing control right here for the path. So you can do multiple parameters. All right, and I've covered this in some of the other tutorials, but when you have a bouncing ball and you want to come out, you're going to come out slow, and then you want to come in fast as it falls because it picks up gravity. And we've reviewed this before, but the way you want to do that is you want to go at the peak points and you want to drag your control horizontally, and you can check that by going in and just clicking apply, and we can see that the frames are getting closer together at the top, which means it's moving slower, and they're spreading apart at the bottom, which means it's moving faster. So we can hit apply and next, and now we're at the bottom, and at the bottom these controls are such that this side, the left side, corresponds to the left path that the object has taken, so it's between these two. The right side here corresponds to the right path here, and we want to drag these vertically up and down. Let's hit apply so we can see that it's doing what we want, and you can see it is. Again, the frames are even moving even farther apart here, so it's coming down fast and it's leaving fast and comes up to the peak, so that is exactly what we want. So we'll hit apply and next, Same kind of thing. These will be horizontal, not vertical. Hit apply to check it. You can see that. And so we hit apply, and next we go to the last one, and the last one will come down like this and hit apply, and that's doing what we want. So let me close this, and this is a first approximation on our easing, and that's starting to look okay. It's a little bit too long in the hang time up here, but there's a few more things we can do to fix things. All right, so let's go in here. One of the things we can do is, because this is a 3D path, not separate, you can only do this with a 3D path. With a 3D path, I can put in what are called control points, and I can change the path that the ball takes. So first off, the ball coming in and swinging down this way is unrealistic. It's actually going to loop and come down this way, hit, and then bounce up. All right, so we can change that by adding control points. The way you add a control point is I just put my cursor approximately where I want it, and I hit the letter P, and that drops a control point. Now notice, this is not a keyframe. This has nothing to do with timing. There's nothing been added to my timeline down here. This is simply a control point, and I can click on this and move it, and I can drag the path that the ball is going to take. And so you can see that. So I can go over here, hit another P, and I can change that path, and I can go over here, hit another P. I can click on that and drag it, and I can change the path that the ball is taking. So now we can see, as we play this through, the ball is taking a little bit more time, but the path is more realistic in terms of the path that it's taking. Okay, so a couple of the things we can do. First off, we want to go back, and we can change that easing. Okay, so it seems to be hanging up in here just a little bit too long. So what we can do is, let me click on this, bring up our easing, and I probably have these pulled out way too far. So this is really stretching it too much. So I can go in here and hit apply and hit close, and let's play this through. So that's looking better. See, I'm coming through that peak much faster. And now I'm coming down, I hit hard, I go up, I have a little bit of hang time, and then I come back down. So as a first approximation, that's actually looking pretty good. And you can see we were able to accomplish that fairly quickly by going in, and first we put in our keyframes, second we go in, we change our easing with the set ease for multiple parameter control that we have here. And then I went in and put in my control points to change how this path gets modified. So let's do the same animation and turn the 3D ball off and use my separate ball, and we can see my separate ball has separate controls. That means I can actually go in and modify the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis parameters. It's not that I can't necessarily with a 3D path. Let's go back up and take a look at that. The problem is if I scroll this down, you see here my path position, X, Y, and Z are all combined together. All right, and if I double click on this, I can get a 3D path editor, but this is all of the X, Y, and Z parameters lumped together in this graph, which makes it a little bit confusing to work with. The other thing you do notice, you can see in this particular graph, the control points are actually visible. So I can go in here and I can grab a control point and I can move this around, and you can see how it changes over here. All right, I can grab this control point and move this around, and we can see how it changes with position relative to the 3D path editor. So it's not that you can't edit 3D paths, it's just you don't have independent control of X, Y, and Z. They're kind of tied together, and that makes it a little more difficult to work with. Let's go back and let's look at our separate ball, and let's go ahead and put in our animations for that. So same kind of thing. I don't have stop motion keyframe enabled. I'm going to go in, start with a keyframe, and let's go out to frame 10, and I'll come down, and notice the default here is just a straight line. So that puts in my first point, come up here, there's my second point, go over here, and there's my third point. Now we can go in and look at this. Let's play this through. And this is just as boring as my first one was. All right. And now what we want to do is we want to go in and set our easing parameters. Now, with a separate controls, I can go in and use the set ease for multiple parameters. The problem is this actually gets a little bit confusing, because what this ends up doing is it plays around with the value of X, Y, and Z and where they are spatially. And so using the set ease parameters for separate control is actually a little bit confusing. And you're far better off using position controls. The way to do this is, let's go in and scroll this down, and now we have position X, position Y, and position Z. And so let me double click on position X, and we can see I have the keyframes for the X position in the 3 different points. Well, it turns out that if you understand the physics of motion, when the ball is being thrown in the X direction, okay, the velocity coming through here really doesn't change too much, except it slows down a little bit each time it hits. It loses a little bit of forward energy, all right? And while I could keep my keyframes here if I want, it's actually sometimes a little bit easier to take the X keyframes, select them, and just even delete them. Come down here to this beginning keyframe and just drag it so I can make the curve a little bit curved so it looks like this. And this exactly accomplishes what I want to do, where there is just a slowing down in speed of the X velocity. All right. And you can see my curves actually have an initial bend now to them because I've done that. Position Y shows exactly what's going on here, and here you can see the curve, and here's my Bezier editor for position Y. And so what I can do is I can drag and select this, and look what I can do here. So I can go in and grab these curves for the Y, and now you can see on the Y-axis how I've modified this. So this is the path that it's taken, and I've changed it by changing the Y values. So I can go in here, do the same kind of thing, go over here, same kind of thing, select this one and bring that up just a little bit. And so this path reflects what's going on here. Now you can see some things are a little bit out of skew. So I can go in and we can go to this point right here, and I can actually grab this and modify it and change how it looks positionally till it looks the way that I want it to appear. And so now I'm getting somewhat of an even kind of distribution here between X and Y. So we see that comes down, it's going to come up and come back down. I can close this, let's loop this, and let's play this. So you can see very quickly, just using the X and Y position controls, I was able to add the proper amount of easing that simulates how the ball falls and comes down. And that's using the separate controls. So let's put the two on top of each other and we can view the two together. And you can determine, you know, which one looks more realistic and which one does not. They both have a nice hang time. They both come down fast. They both hit hard. They come up and they come back down. The key difference here is how did I accomplish the easing? And with a 3D path, the easing is easier accomplished using the set ease for multiple parameters. And for a separate path object, the easing is easier controlled using the Bezier editor. So hopefully this will help you with your animations, give you some insight into how you can set your easing for whatever animation it is that you're doing. And there are advantages to using the 3D path. There are advantages to be using separate. One thing to keep in mind though is when you choose to use one of these different kind of approaches to the path animations, once you set it, you can't change it. If you do all of your keyframing with a 3D path and you set it up as a 3D path and you get all the way done and you say, oh shoot, I wish I would have done that to separate, you will find that when you click separate, you lose all of your keyframes. If you go back and click on 3D path, their keyframes will remain there. But you have to essentially keyframe everything all over again. And when you keyframe all over again, you're going to lose your 3D path keyframes, and vice versa. So you do need to decide ahead of time which version or which method of position control you want to do in Harmony. But I think you'll find that both of these are quite advantageous. They both have their strengths and their weaknesses, but hopefully this tutorial will help explain this a little bit better for you. So this has been Phil with Phil Effects. Thanks again.